Good afternoon, everyone. I gave a presentation a few days ago to our photography club called Overview of Lightroom Classic. And what I'm going to do is just give a brief intro here and then combine the short video clips I made as part of my presentation that show some of the basic workflow. So that's what this is. I don't claim to be a Lightroom expert. I have used it for many years, and it is my main photograph processing program. So in listening to what I said in some of my short video clips, I used some incorrect terminology, but be that as it may, those of you who want to learn a little bit about Lightroom might find it helpful. So Lightroom itself was released in 2006 on the Mac and on the PC in 2007. The program is used for sorting, categorizing, rating, processing and editing images, and it enables you to manage and process vast numbers of images. In my main catalog I have just over 180,000 images, and I have about 5 or 6 other catalogs totaling in all about 250,000 images that I manage and process with Lightroom. So my purpose on the evening that I gave the presentation was basically just to provide an overview of Lightroom and its workflow, or the workflow as I use it. These are the major features of Lightroom. It has a built-in database, and that database tracks your images and the editing commands that you perform on them. And it also helps a tremendous amount when you want to find a particular photograph based on a subject or a camera used or a lens used or a location, or if you want to find all your long exposure photographs by shutter speed or high ISO work by person or whatever. Extremely useful. If you are a photographer, you need Lightroom to help you manage all of your photographs. And the second major aspect is that it has non-destructive editing. Any editing you do in Lightroom itself is not actually editing your photograph or the base raw file or JPEG file or JPG that you may be working on. It is non-destructive editing. It just saves the instructions that you use, and it applies those when you export the image and create your finished product. Now, most people organize their photographs based on folders, and I have folders as well, like this. I have a little server which is my iDrive, and I have iData, images, photos, and then all of these folders. So on the right you can see, if you had it locally on your C drive, I would use something like C, data, photos. Then I have categories for people, family, friends, another category for travel, and then location, Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Europe, USA, Alaska, USA, Colorado, and so on. So most people organize their photographs by folder. If you just throw all of your images into your pictures folder, you will have a terrible time trying to find them. Now, images saved in folders only work to a point, because the problem you find immediately is that you have a photograph. If you have a folder system set up, you'll have photographs that could fall in multiple categories. Like here, I visited Death Valley back in 2011. Well, on the way, I spent some time with friends and family. And the problem then is, where do I file those photographs? Do I put them under the workshop that I attended in Death Valley because they were part of my Death Valley trip? Or do I put them in photos, people, friends, and the year and the date? Where do I put them? Because the problem comes then, like say with this, 10 years later, I want to find a particular photograph that I took of my friend's son. Well, where is it? Is it in my Death Valley folder, or did I put it in people, friends, and in their folder by date? So folders only work to a point, and those of you who only use folders know that when you have to look for something, it's a major dog to find them. And Lightroom's catalog is, as I say at the bottom there, a lifesaver when it comes to managing images. Now, I'm an architect and I think with diagrams, so I like making diagrams. So here's a diagram that to me explains how Lightroom works. On the left there is, say, one of my folders on my hard drive. So photos in a folder on your hard drive. Then in the middle you have Lightroom, and Lightroom's core feature is this thing called a catalog. And all the catalog is a database containing information about your photos on the hard drive. So you import photos into Lightroom, and all it does is add the information about your photos, the camera, the ISO, all that sort of stuff to its database. And as I say on the bottom left there, the images themselves, people will say to me, but where did Lightroom copy my photographs to? Are they in the catalog? It's like, no, your photographs are exactly where you put them on your hard drive. All Lightroom does is take the information about those photographs and stores it all in the catalog. Now you can, and I won't explain how to do this, you can tell Lightroom to, okay, take all these photographs off the card that I put into my card reader and move them and put them into a specific folder. I don't do that, and we'll go through that on the import process. I basically create the folder I want, copy my photographs from my card into that folder, then in Lightroom I just import that folder into the Lightroom catalog. If I remember correctly, by default that's the setting Lightroom uses. When you import photographs, it leaves them exactly where they are. Then on the right there, when you make changes, Lightroom has these modes or modules. It has, for example, a library mode and a develop mode. And in the library mode is where you can keyword them, you can sort them, you can rate your photographs, reject or delete them, you can find images, and you can export images once you've edited them from the library mode as well. In the develop mode, that's where you edit and adjust your images, and you can export them from the develop mode as well. Now, in all of these modes on the right there, as you are working on them and making those changes, it writes these changes back to the catalog. So if you raise the exposure and put on a filter or something, that is written to the database in the center there. It's not affecting the original master file. So again, this catalog keeps track of all the information on the right. And a lot of people, when they talk to me about Lightroom, I find they do get confused about the catalog, and they think that all of their photos are being copied into the catalog and all that sort of thing. And they are not. It is only the information about your photos and the editing that you do to them that is stored in the catalog, not the photographs themselves. And that's why it's non-destructive editing, because on the right here in the develop mode, as you edit and adjust, it's only the changes for each image file that you are doing that are saved in the catalog. It is not that it does not change your original master file. So now I'm going to go through the various little steps and videos that I showed in my presentation, and I will just combine those now and add them to this file to show the videos that I showed and explained to our club. And I'm doing this too so that any club members can get onto here and review what I told them and skip through this video and get to the points they'd like to see, and hopefully some will find this helpful. Okay, so this is how to import photographs into Lightroom. Lightroom is running here, and I have my bird catalog open, and I started this catalog this year because I used to throw all of my photographs into one big catalog, and decided it would be better over time to put certain subjects in specific catalogs. So since there are times when I go out specifically to try and photograph birds, I then made a catalog for bird photography just a month or two ago and started putting my bird photographs into it. So it remembers where I was last time, and we have the photographs on my hard drive in a location where I know where they are. And to import it, it's quite simple. You just say File, import photos and video, and it remembers the last location on my hard drive where Lightroom was, which happened to be in my bird photography folder. So in that folder I can just scroll down to 2021 and 2021-04 and 01, because on the 1st of April I took these photographs. So Lightroom searches that folder, and in the folder it found these photographs that were not in its database, and you know that because they're all light and they're all checked. If there were photographs in there that I had already imported, they would be dull grey and they wouldn't be checked. And if there were photographs in that group that I didn't want to import, for example, I might have been photographing a bird and saw a nice plant or something and taken a photograph of it as a plant study, then all you would do is uncheck the ones you don't want to import it, and they go grey like that and they won't be imported into this catalog. So it's as simple as that. In this case, however, I want them all, so I leave them all checked. Then I can add the keywords I use. It's critical that you add keywords as you import your photographs, because those are extremely useful down the line. So in this case I would use bird, comma, birds, and I'm doing it there in the keyword panel, and birds, nature. I would also use Northeast Texas, Tyler. So those are the keywords that apply to all of those photographs. Some are of a sparrow, some are of a dove. So once I've imported them, then we'll add the keyword sparrow and dove to those particular ones. So once you have that, you just click import, and Lightroom now pulls them into its catalog, adds them to the bird catalog. Now it's not copying these photographs or anything like that. All it's doing is adding them to the database, to which is its catalog. Now we have them all in the bird catalog, and at this point I can see, okay, all of those are sparrows. There's the first dove one. So the first one is selected, hold shift, click on the last one, and I can go to keywords again, a comma, and say sparrow, and enter. Now the keyword sparrow is added to all of those. To do the dove, click on the first, shift, click on the last, comma, dove. Now the keyword dove is added to all of those. And it's as simple as that to import and add keywords. And where that really helps you is here, for example. I've imported 18 photographs there. I can say go to all photographs, so I now have 2,913. And if I go to metadata, in the metadata I've got keywords, date, camera, lens, label. You can change those to be whatever you like. But if I wanted to see, well, what shots do I have of a blue jay? I can just click on blue jay. And there are all my shots of a blue jay. If I want to see what shots do I have of a brown thrasher, there are shots that I've got keyworded brown thrasher. House finch, what shots do I have of a house finch? So there are all the shots I have of a house finch. And then by date too, I can see what shots did I take of a house finch on January the 5th. There they are. On January 31st, there they are. And so on. So keywording is extremely useful. And then you can also search by the metadata, the camera, the lens, and so on. So that is how to import. Very simple, very straightforward. Critical that you add keywords, because they are very useful when you want to find photographs down the line. The next step that I always try and do after importing photographs like this is geotagging them. My camera doesn't have any GPS ability, so when you import photographs it doesn't know where they are. If I'm way out in the country somewhere or wherever like that, then I usually use my phone, take a quick photo with my phone and import it with my regular camera shots, because the phone often very accurately provides a geotag. In this case, however, I know exactly where this is on the maps, so I usually immediately geotag my photographs after taking them. So in this case, we're still in the library mode. Right now, we would go into the map mode, and it remembers where I was last time. So I know where this is. You need an internet connection to do this, and I just zoom in. I took these in my mom's backyard, which is there. So all you do now is come down here, select all of these photographs, and they were all taken in the same location. So click and hold, drag them onto the map, and drop them where I took them. And just like that, all of them have been geotagged, and in the bottom there, that little indicator shows that the photo has GPS coordinates. So it's as simple as that. If any photographs were taken in a different location in the group that you were importing, you just select the group from the one location, drag and drop, select the next ones, drag and drop them to a different location. And it's as simple as that to geotag these photographs in Lightroom. Okay, so now I will show you some of the major Lightroom editing tools, ones that I use quite a lot. So I've opened my master catalog here, which has about 180,000 plus image files in it. And here's a shot I took with my Nikon D810 in Canada a few years ago. It's a RAW file, 36 megapixels, and as you can see, it's a bit flat. So it's been imported, geotagged, and so on. So now we want to start editing it a little bit. Now you will see we're in library mode at the moment, and to get into the editing mode, you click on Develop. When I do that, these two side panels will change. So click on Develop, and you are now in the developing area of Lightroom, and it gives you different options on each side. On the left are a variety, some of them are a variety of presets that are built into Lightroom that you can use, and you can also make your own presets. So over the years I've made a selection of quite a few presets that I use as well, that I've developed while editing my photographs, because the idea is if you've edited a photograph like this and you've gotten something you like, you can save it as a preset, or you can copy it to another photograph and so on. So for example, if I come in there, I can go to AGR Banff Jasper, and here are presets that I developed on this trip that worked well for some of the images. So one of these could potentially, like that one, give me a good starting point. But what I'm going to do is show you just some of the basics. So Lightroom, you can do similar things with many different functions in different ways. So for starters, let's say we think, okay, we want to start editing this image. And bear in mind, it's non-destructive editing. It is just saving the instructions for what I'm editing in the database and showing me the result, but it's not saving the whole file. It's not affecting the image file at all. So at top right there, in the histogram, if I want to raise the exposure a little, I can just click in the histogram, drag it to the right a little bit, and do something like that. I can grab the dark areas, the blacks, or the shadows, or the bright areas and the highlights, and drag them down a bit and tweak it like that. Grab the mid-range, tweak it up a little bit, and so on. And typically, when I've done that, then the next thing I usually do is use one of these Lightroom presets under Classic General, and I'll use the punch option. So if I slide onto it, Lightroom adds a little bit of vibrance, a little bit of clarity, and clarity is mid-range contrast, and vibrance is an option that boosts muted colors. So I would often do that, and it may be a little bit too much clarity for my taste, but again, it gives me a starting point. Then I come back to the right, and on the right you have all of these panels that open up. So, and you have these options here too. Crop, the spot removal, red eye reduction, graduated filter, radial filter, and the adjustment brush. So I'll show you each of these quickly and what I would typically do. For starters, let's say it looks like it may be just a little off horizontal, although that's probably the perspective there, because in the distance it looks pretty horizontal. But if we wanted to crop it or adjust the rotation, crop is the tool you use for that. If it's locked, as you see there, it will keep it in that proportion. If we undo the lock, then we can crop this however we like. I'll lock it again, and if we say no, we want it in a, let's say, a 4/3 proportion, there's a 4/3 proportion, and then I can move it around like that and get what I want. Or if I just right click and say reset crop, it takes me back to that view. So if I want to rotate it a little, all I can do is gently take it a little bit, say like that, and say done. And that's how the crop tool works. These others, let's show you spot removal. Spot removal is pretty standard. Most systems have that. You basically click on spot removal, you get a circle and an inner circle, and you can adjust the size of the feathering and so on there, the opacity. You roll your mouse to make it smaller or larger, and let's say if we wanted to remove that little piece of rock, we can go there, click on it. Lightroom chooses what it thinks matches the best. If you don't like it, you can click on the second circle and drag it around and move it till you get what you like and say done. And that's how you remove spots. The graduated filter is very useful. So in a shot like this, let's say we wanted to raise the exposure on the foreground. I can just click graduated filter. All the options for that crop up. Last time I used it, I was underexposing, so I can say no, I want to take up the exposure, but I'll leave the rest the same. You can adjust all of this, contrast, highlight, shadows, whatever, in the graduated filter. Then you click and drag, and as you can see how it's affecting the image. So if I play with the exposure, I'll overdo it. So there it's overdone, and there it's underdone, and you can tweak it and get it to what you would like with a graduated filter, much like you would use dodging and burning if you had a darkroom. You can also adjust the contrast, the highlights, the shadows. I can bring up the shadows a little bit more in that. I can take the whites up or take the whites down, all sorts of things. Adjust the texture, the clarity, boost the muted colors a little, or sorry, clarity is mid-range contrast, dehaze it a little bit if I wanted to. So all of these options, sharpness, noise reduction, are all available with the graduated filter, which is an extremely useful tool. If you click on the outside of it, you can drag it to make the filter wider to have a much more subtle effect, or narrower to make the effect more dramatic. And I think I showed you, you can rotate it to the angle you want. If you click this little box here, it shows a mask overlay showing you which part of the image is being affected. The radial filter works pretty much the same way, except it's, as you'll see, a radial filter. So if I click on that, let's say I want to bring down the sky a little, so I'll take the exposure down a little. I'll overdo it a bit so I can see where it's working. Add a little bit of mid-range contrast. Then you click in the image and drag and hold, and you can see what it's doing. So at this stage I don't want it to affect the mountains, so I can click on the center, then go outside of it. You get a little curly arrow. I can rotate it and then move it up like that. So it's basically just affecting that part of the image. And in the same way as the graduated filter, you can do all these sorts of adjustments in there. Take the highlights up, take the highlights down, whatever. So it is an extremely useful tool, like for adjusting pupils, or the iris on a person's eye, adjusting that. Very, very useful tool. And if you want to change it, you just click on one of these little grips and you can change it. So I'll say done. So that's all of those. Oh, the brush adjustment brush. That can be very useful tool to. Like say we wanted to bring down some of the brightness in that area. I can click on Adjustment Brush. It has all the options just like the tools we've just looked at. I'll leave the exposure down there. You can make it bigger, make it smaller. You can adjust the feathering if you would like to, and so on. Go down there and I can say feather it a little bit less, and then you basically click and then you paint. So as I'm painting, you can see the exposure coming down there. Now I'm not doing a great job here. I can make it smaller to go down the coast, to go along the bottom there, go up there, and so on. Again, just to show you how it basically works. So now if I adjust the exposure, you'll see how it's affecting just that portion of the image. And if you overdid it, or you went into an area you didn't want, all you simply do is push the Alt button with that active, and you can remove parts of the adjustment brush mask as well. So that is also an extremely useful tool for working on images, and when you're finished you just say done. You can add more of them, like for example if I said adjustment brush, let's say I wanted to tone, or I don't know, let's say raise these mountains a little, then I would go to positive exposure, click, and then I could paint in there and very gently raise the exposure on those mountains, doing something like that. And I could say raise the shadows a bit, and you see how it's affected that. Take the shadows down. So very, very useful tool. If you decided you wanted to remove one of them, then all you do is click on the brush, adjustment brush. You would click on the one you want active, and then you would simply push the delete button and it would delete it. And it works the same way with the graduated filter and the radial filter. You can have multiple filters in your file, and you can click on one of the tools to make them active and delete or adjust the ones you don't want. So that, or like the basic palette here with all of those tools, operate on the whole image, whereas if you use these filters, they then operate on only portions of the image. And you also have the tone curve. So if I click on that, there's the tone curve, and if I want to adjust that, I can click and drag, take down dark areas a little, take the mid-range up a little, and it looks kind of nice, and I can leave it at that, and that's done. I won't go through everything here because there's too much, but let's say you want to look at sharpening. This is under the detail panel. Now, by default, pulling it in, it's applied a bit of sharpening, but that's applied to the whole image. So if I zoom in by clicking on the image and using the zoom factors up here, we can see the trees across the way there. But right now, this sharpening is being applied to the entire image. If we only wanted to apply it, well, you can with masking. Here's how this works. So with masking all the way to the left, i.e. zero masking, it's applied to the whole image. But if I hold the Alt key and drag, now it's showing me the edges. So when it's like that, it's applied to the entire image. But as I drag across, it's only being applied to the white areas. So I can reduce and say, like there, it's hardly to the sky at all, but there's more sharpening to the foreground and texture on the hill. So now when I apply sharpening and adjust the fineness or coarseness of it and the detail and so on, it's only affecting those areas. So the finer detail in the trees it's affecting, but it's not trying to sharpen the water and the clouds and that sort of thing. An extremely useful tool. Noise reduction, pretty standard, available in any or just about any editing type program, so there's no need to cover that. Oh, one more thing briefly, lens correction. That is very useful, like for me especially as an architect, lens correction and transform to make vertical lines vertical or horizontal lines horizontal. Very useful to do that. Now the other thing to bear in mind is when you make those changes, Lightroom is, it's not copying the file or making layers. So yes, you have a little more versatility in Photoshop where you have layers and things, but the file size, it grows massively. This file is about 40 megs on my hard drive. If I export it as a TIFF file into Photoshop and add one layer, it grows to over 100 megs. If I add 2 or 3 layers and adjustment layers, you can easily hit 300, 400 megs for one file, which is awful when you have thousands and thousands of photographs like I have. So in that aspect, Lightroom is vastly more efficient. So after that quick little bit of editing, that's what we ended up, just very quick dirty editing. There's the original, there's the edited version. Now typically I would work on this file. I just saved a virtual copy of it so that I could easily show you both of them, and you could see with just a little tweaking what it did. And if you decide, I like that, but I wanted to tweak it a bit more, all you do is right click, create virtual copy, and bang, it makes another copy of that, and you can edit and tweak it and adjust it and make another virtual copy. Let's try a different proportion. Let's make another virtual copy, convert it into a monochrome, and all of those virtual copies. So we are just the instructions that are saved in Lightroom's database, which saves you a vast amount of disk space and means that when you get back to it, you're back to the editing where you were in this file. It's now not just a compressed flat file with no information. So that then is a basic overview of Lightroom and how to get from that to that in a couple of minutes work. And of course you can spend hours in the system tweaking images and adjusting them and getting them to be exactly what you want. Alright, so at this point, let's just assume we've finished editing this photo and others that we want to use. So now you come to the point of exporting it in Lightroom. And here you can export at a high enough resolution for printing, or you can export for use online or Facebook or whatever. So exporting is very easy as well. You can export from the develop mode. You go up here and you can say File, Export. But typically you have a few files that you want to do, and I usually do it from the library mode. So if I go back to the library mode and I'm now in the grid view there, we were in a view like this showing us the thumbnails at the bottom and full preview at the top. But if I go back to grid view, and at the moment I had the red filter active, so I can say show me just my red categorized files in the strip, and let's say we wanted to export a few. It's very easy to do. Let's say we wanted to export that one. This is the one we worked on, so I'm going to say click on that one, hold the control key, and I want this one, and I want the one we worked on, and I want, I don't know, that one. So let's say we want to export those 4 files. Then, very simple, we just say File, Export. And the export dialog box pops up like this, and you have a whole lot of options. These are all exports that I have saved because you can choose. Typically this is what I use, and I won't explain every option here, but typically I want to export here to a specific folder. Then I need to tell Lightroom where that folder is. The last time I used it was Data, Images, Facebook, Sites, Olympus EM1 Mark II, and a folder. So in this case I want to say choose the folder, and I want it to be on my data drive, and I'm going to go down to my photography folder, photography, and in there East Texas Camera Club 2021 Lightroom presentation. So I'm going to export them to that folder and say select folder. Then further on you have all these options. You can rename them, you can set the quality of the file you want. So you can set it to be a JPG or PSD, a Photoshop file, a TIFF file, a PNG, a DNG, or whatever. So typically for, let's say we want to do this for online use, JPG, quality 100, I usually use 100% quality. Color space, you can choose what you want, sRGB for online use. Then typically when I'm uploading to Facebook or wherever, I don't put up full resolution photos. I only put up 1920 on the long edge. You can choose a width and height or whatever you want. I typically use long edge and I tell it no bigger than 1920 pixels, and don't enlarge it. So if I have a tighter crop, it's not going to try and enlarge it. And resolution 72 pixels per inch. So if someone stole one of my photographs, it might look great on their computer, but it won't work very well if they wanted to print it. And then if I'm intending it for screen use, like for Facebook or whatever, I will usually have checked sharpen for screen, standard amount. And I usually remove person info because you can tag people in Lightroom as well. So typically if I'm exporting it, I will remove person info. If I don't want any of my metadata, I can say I want copyright only. Watermark, you can have a little watermark. I've made one so you can check it to use it or uncheck it, and you can have a variety of watermarks. And then when it's finished processing, don't do anything. So that basically is the settings you use for exporting. And if you decide, I want to use those a lot, then all you do here on the left is say add preset, and you can save a preset for it. So for example, for our camera club, I have there AGR Facebook East Texas Camera Club, and that sets the resolution I want for when I export an image for the camera club. For our camera club submission, where it has to be 1500 pixels wide, there is AGR eText Camera Club submission. So that's saved. If I wanted to use that now, I could just click on it. All these settings are set for it, and I say export, and it's done. So we have selected the photographs. We went to File, Export. We changed the settings to what we wanted them to be and the location we wanted it. Or we could have easily used a preset, and then you just say export. And up top left, that shows you it's exporting 4 files. If I pull this across in there they come. I'll say view large icons or extra large icons, and there they're coming. And now they're all exported, and they are ready to be emailed or uploaded or whatever we want to do, and all of those files are done. So fairly simple. That now there of course a lot of complexity as well, but as an overview, all of this now should give you a pretty good feel for what is possible, what it can do, and if you dig a bit more, there's a lot more information as well. So that then is Lightroom. Alright, so I've shown you an overview of Lightroom and then shown you some of the major editing features, but I thought I'd make another short clip just to show you the fantastic abilities you have with the database function, because as always you need to find a photograph, or you know that you've taken some particular photograph and you can't find it, and if you are relying just on folders, you are going to have major problems trying to find your photographs. So I'm in my main catalog here, and let's say that I want to try and find portrait photographs taken, say, with my 85mm nickel. I'm a member of a couple of groups on Facebook, and you'll find a question where someone will say, hey, does anyone have the 85mm nickel and have any examples of it or whatever? Or for yourself, you know, I took a photograph with that lens. Now what did I do with it? Where did I put it? Well, if you've keyworded them, and with the metadata that is saved in the Lightroom database from the camera and the body and all of that. It's very easy to find. So all you do is you get into your main catalog like this. So this one here, I have 181,583 photographs, and all I need to do is click on metadata. So now that I'm in metadata, I've organized these with keyword, date, camera, lens, label, you know, blue, green, whatever, ISO. It could be, you can change these, you can click on it and really choose whatever you want. If I wanted to add, well, what aperture did I use? So I'm looking for portraits. So I move over to the keyword area here, scroll down towards the P area, MNOP. So roll up a little bit, and there's project, pottery, portrait lens, portrait format, portraits. So if you look at the keyword portrait there, I have 6,699 photographs with the keyword portrait. So I can say, okay, show me all of those. But I know I want it with my 85mm nickel. So for now I can ignore all of the dates, and I can come in here. It obviously won't be with a Canon or with an Olympus or with my iPhone. There are my Nikons, the D700, the D800, the D810 and the Z6, and these are all portraits. So I have 1,156 with the D700, 1,009 with the D800, 1,082 with the D810, and 93 with the Z6, because I haven't had it as long as the others. So now I can refine this further and say I want the D700, and I can hold Control and say and the D800 and the D810 and the Z6. So right now I'm looking at portraits, all dates with those 4 cameras, and they are all here. So I can refine that further and say, but now I want the 85mm f1.4. So there now I have portraits with my 85mm f1.4, and there they all are, as quick as that. If I want the ones that are my favorites, I can say I want the red ones. There are my portraits that I've classified as being red. So it's as easy as that to find a portrait photograph that I've taken with any of those cameras with the 85mm 1.4. And if I want to know, well, what have I done with my D810 with that lens, I can just click on the D810. And then it's showing me all of those portraits, and I can come back in here and say, okay, and with the 85mm 1.4, and now I'm seeing all of the portrait photographs, or photographs that I've labeled as being portrait, that I've taken with my 85 1.4. And if I want to know, well, what have I done with the D810 and my defocus control 105mm nickel, I can just click on it there, and lo and behold, there it is. So it's a wonderful, wonderful way to find photographs, because often you struggle if you just save things in a folder and then you're relying on that folder to try and find a particular photograph or something like that. It's a major, major pain. So you can look, it's simple, with especially with keywords, to find just about anything you want. Let's see if I can find. So Sacré-Cœur over in Paris. I can say, okay, let me see what shots have I got of that. And bang, just like that. And they were all with my, at that stage, my Nikon D800. So I can say I want to see shots I took with the D800 and the 16 to 35. And there I have those. I can reduce the size of that, and I can get in here and I can look at the shots that I took at Sacré-Cœur a couple of years ago with my D800 and the 16 to 35. So that just gives you a little glimpse of the amazing power you have with the database in Lightroom. I could go back and get into there and say, well, there's my aperture. What aperture did I use? Or I can say, what shutter speed did I use? 60th of a second, 1/80th of a second, 100th of a second, 1/25th. You can search for this in just about any way you like. And if I add the attribute field, I can say, and I want all the red ones and the yellow, and there you are. So it is a fantastic tool. As a photographer, being able to store and find my photographs like this is absolutely wonderful. Lightroom has, just as a summary, Lightroom has a built-in database that tracks your images and editing and helps you find them. And the ability to quickly find images you want is absolutely wonderful. You just have to do the upfront work, adding your keywords and so on, and if you take a little time to do that, you will absolutely love it and never regret it. Plus, it is a very powerful system for editing your images and non-destructive editing. And then too, with Lightroom being an Adobe product and so well integrated with Photoshop, you can easily export an image sort of in an automated manner. You just right click and say edit in Photoshop. It automatically creates a TIFF file, opens Photoshop, pulls that into it, you edit it, you adjust it, you change it, you save it, and that adjusted TIFF file is immediately and automatically back in Lightroom, where you can then do your final tweaks in Lightroom. The same with DxO and Luminar or the Nick collection. If you install those as add-ons to Lightroom, you can also get to them directly from inside Lightroom, treat them in one of those systems, pull it right back into Lightroom, do your final tweaks, and export it from Lightroom. So it is a wonderful, wonderful system, and I would highly recommend that you look at it and consider it if you are struggling with thousands of photographs and struggling to find and keep track of them and edit them.